Ang dami ko napapanood sa YouTube. They introduce what they do for a living. I'm pretty sure alam niyo na kung ano yung trabaho ko. I made videos about that in the past. Pero isang thing na hindi ko nasabi sa inyo is yung mga naging trabaho ko. Like all of the jobs that I've had ever since I became of age to legally work dito sa Canada. So I figure I make this video, again, not just for content, but also for my children. So that way one day, if YouTube is still around 50 years from now, 100 years from now, they can come back and see and, you know, find out some information about their lolo, which is me. So, yeah. So, yung dad ko, to start, yung dad ko ayaw kong pagtrabahuhin nung teenager ako. Sabi niya sa akin, just concentrate sa eskwelahan. Yung mga kaibigan ko, they were getting part-time jobs sa McDonald's, sa Canadian Tire, you know, a bunch of fast food places. And, you know, they were making good money, like money to go out, you know, buy stuff, go out, you know, pay for this, pay for that. Ako wala. And that really frustrated me. So I told my dad, you know, I pleaded with him, you know, please let me work. So I think one of my videos I mentioned, my very first job was a chip runner at the casino that my dad was managing at that time nung teenager ako. Hindi pa ako legal nun because you have to be 18 to work in a casino, right? I think I was like 16 or something like that. You know, I was a big kid, so, you know, I can pass. So, yeah, I was like the guy with a pouch around my waist. Tapos yung mga players, tatawagin ako, and they would buy chips from me in exchange for money so they can play dun sa mesa. And after that, you know, I touched up on this again on my previous videos. I became a dealer for the charity casinos that was going around from place to place every 3 days dun sa Toronto dati. You know, my father actually managed a couple of them, and I pretty much worked for all of them. So yeah, that was my first exposure to the job market. Tapos nun, natapos na ako ng high school. I graduated from high school. Tapos sabi ng dad ko, go to college. To be completely honest, hindi ko alam kung ano gusto kong gawin nun. Basta alam mo naman yung parents from people in my generation, you know, they always sasabihin sa'yo, kailangan after high school, you go get a degree, go to college, go to university. So, you know, that's the path that I tried to take. So, I enrolled sa Sheridan College sa Oakville, and I was taking business administration accounting. It was supposed to be a 3-year course. I lasted a year and a half. I guess nung teenager ako, masyado akong mabulakpol. Okay? My dad and my mom, they gave me some money for the tuition and the school expenses, but a lot of the money came from OSAP. Dito sa Canada, OSAP is like a government student loan. Problema nun, yung OSAP ko, hindi ko ginamit sa eskwela. Yung OSAP ko, ginamit ko pang good time. So, I took the OSAP money and I bought a whole bunch of stuff for my car. I went to Cuba, I went to Jamaica, I went to the Dominican Republic, all using OSAP money. So, I hate to admit, but I'll be completely transparent, I dropped out of college. So, nung araw na yun, umuwi ako. I just dropped out of college. I didn't know how to tell my parents, right? But, you know, eventually I had to, because, like, how long can you hide that for? I was living under their roof. So, you know, they were very disappointed. Sabi nila sa akin, either you go pick another course or magtrabaho ka. So, nagtrabaho ko. I decided to join the workforce again. But really, you know, you're a teenager, wala kang tinapos except for high school. What are you qualified to do? At that moment in time, not much. So fortunately enough, sa Mississauga, sa Oakville. I lived in Oakville, Mississauga-Oakville border. We were on the Oakville side. There were many job placement agencies. Tatawagan mo sila, you give them like a copy of your resume, and then tatawagan ka, and then they'll send you someplace to work for like 8 hours. Basically contract work, right? So that only took maybe a couple of days before I got a phone call. Sabi nila, okay, we got a placement for you. Pumunta ka sa Mississauga Library. So here I was, hindi ko alam kung ano yung trabaho. All I knew it was like construction related. Sabi nila magdala ako ng steel toe boots, which I never did own a pair. Bring gloves. Okay. So mind you, before this job, all I knew how to do was count money sa casino and deal cards. Nahawakan lang ng kamay ko is baraha and salapit. So I found out real quick pagdating ko dun sa library. Yung trabaho pala is construction, to tear down the library dahil they were renovating it. So my boss was actually a good dude, It was very nice. I figure it's an honest days of work. It's an honest living, and I was not ashamed to get my hands dirty because I dropped out of school. What else would I be doing? I figure kung magiging construction ako, I'll try to be the best construction worker alive in the world. So that job, that contract lasted 3 days, and I worked my butt off. I wanted to prove to my boss that, hey, you know what? If you can, officially hire me onto your crew. And he was very, very happy with the work that I did. Sabi niya, oh, you're so easy to get along with, and you don't complain, you just work. And to me that felt good. But unfortunately, yung company nung boss ko, that boss, it wasn't that big. He didn't have the capacity to hire me full time. So, all he needed me for was the 3 days to tear down the reno job, right? So pagkatapos nun, natikman ko kung paano magtrabaho like doing manual labor. And you know what? Bata ako noon, I didn't care. I think they paid me $7 an hour because that was the minimum wage back then. And then, you know what? I was happy. And then a couple days after that job was done, tinawagan na ulit ako nung job placement company. And they sent me to this fireplace company sa Brampton, Ontario. Kalimutan ko na yung pangalan. Pero it was a factory job, putting together furnaces dito sa Canada. So they put me on an assembly line, and yung trabaho ko nun was they gave me a caulking gun, okay? And my job was to seal the metal box for the fireplace with tar, grasa na tumitigas na maitim. That was my job. So, to be honest, I hated the job. But I liked the people na katrabaho ko. It was a factory filled with people like me, just doing an honest day's work. And tumagal ako doon mga 2 linggo. So after the first week, parang nagustuhan ko na yung trabaho because it was regular, right? Like I was showing up at the same place every single morning, and I was making friends. And like the job wasn't that great, pero I was happy. I was happy with it. One day, umuwi ako sa bahay after my shift. I was still like a young teenager, right? Just dropped out of college. Now doing factory work. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Like I said, it's an honest living. Pero this is where my life kind of took a pivot, in a totally different direction. So, not to brag, okay, but at that time, I was driving a Corvette. This is a true story. I was driving a red Corvette. I guess nagalo sa akin ng lola ko yun. So, I was a college dropout. I was working for $7 an hour in a factory sa Brampton, Ontario, putting together fireplaces. And it was a super dirty job. And I was driving a Corvette. I didn't have any money. Regalo sa akin ng lola ko yun. But it just didn't fit. Anyways, I'll put this all together. You'll understand why I mentioned the Corvette. So umuwi ako dun sa house namin sa Oakville. Buhay pa yung lola ko nun. Every time uuwi ako, yung kwarto niya is facing the driveway. So it didn't matter how late na uuwi ako. Lagi kong napapansin yung kurtina bumubukas ng ganon. And I can see her peeking through the curtains to see kung ako nga yun na uuwi na. So, napansin ko when I was pulling into her driveway, I saw the kurtina bumukas ng ganon. It was my mama. I guess she was waiting for me. She wanted to see, to talk to me. So, I parked the car. I went inside the house. And then the moment I walked into the house, sinigawan niya ako. Mark! Panay ka dito. Gusto kitang kausapin. Sabi ni mama. So sure enough, sabi ko, ma, sandali lang, magbibihis muna ako, napakadupa ko, napakadumi ko. I was wearing like a gray t-shirt. I had my steel toe boots on. I had jeans and I had grasa, like tar all over my shirt. Madungis ako. But you know what? Nothing wrong with that. I was happy. Okay? Because, I dropped out of college and I'm working. So I'm happy. Anyway, sabi, no, this can't wait. Panik ka dito sa kwarto ko. So pumanik ako sa kwarto ni mama. Sabi niya sa akin, umupo ka dyan. Gusto kitang kausapin. Long story short, she asked, masaya ka ba sa ginagawa mo? Sabi ko, mama, yeah, masaya ako. Well, kung masaya ka, masaya ako para sa'yo. Yun ang sabi niya sa akin. Pero, bata ka pa. Okay? Hindi ko naisip sa utak ko na hanggang ganito ka na lang. In my mind, you could do something much bigger. You could do something greater. You could do something better. Can you do that for me? So, nung sinabi niya sa akin yun, para ako natauhan. And tama siya. Tama siya. Sabi niya sa akin, binili kita ng kotse, ang ganda-ganda, because mahilig ka sa kotse. Tapos, eto ang gagawin mo sa buhay mo. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, my grandmother was saying, she had something in mind that was bigger for me. Sa isip niya, I could do better. And at that time, di ko naintindihan dahil bata ako, right? But she knew in her heart and in her mind that I could do better. So, the following day, I quit. Yeah, I quit that job. And I started calling some of my friends that I worked at sa casino before. Because all of them moved to commercial casinos, right? And naisip ko kasi, of all the jobs that I've had so far, ano yung pinaka nagustuhan ko? Ano yung, which job have I had so far that I enjoyed the most, that I love doing, and that would fit me better? That would fit my skills better. And that was the casino job. So fortunately enough, around that time, Casino Niagara was opening. And yung mga naging kaibigan ko working at the charity casinos in Toronto, they got hired and they told me about that job. So sure enough, I applied and I got accepted as a dealer. I don't know if that was meant to be, but it happened. Sometimes, the Lord God I'm not a very religious person, but I do believe in God. You know, I believe that there's somebody up there watching over us, so you better be a good person. But I also believe that God has a plan for everybody. And things just don't, sorry, may problema ako sa mata ko. It's always dry. You know, things happen for a reason. And I think the reason why this happened was because something was planned for me. Something different was planned for me. Anyways, long story short, I became a part of the opening team's Casino Niagara. So I went from doing a factory job, putting together fireplaces in Brampton, to Niagara as a dealer. So at that time, you know, I don't think I was 20 yet. I was still in my late teens. I think I was like 19 or something like that. So I moved there and I started working there. And money was great. You know, I was getting paid $7 an hour dun sa job ko dun sa Brampton, you know, putting together fireplaces. And it went, and I quadrupled that, or if not even more, dahil pag nagtatrabaho ka as a dealer, they pay you a base rate plus your tips. And tips at a commercial casino, it's actually very, very amazing. So anyways, I worked there not too long, maybe a year and a half or something like that. I'm not sure. And then somebody told me that they were opening up a casino sa Brantford, Ontario. I had no clue where Brantford, Ontario was. As in, I've never been there, never heard of it. I don't know. But then, yung mga katrabaho ko sabi sa akin, hey, you know what? This might be a good opportunity dahil every time a casino opens up, if you can get into the front door as opening team, you can get promoted so quick, like really, really quick. So sure enough, I sent my resume. Actually, back then, walang email, right? You had to go fax your resume, or you had to go physically go to the place of employment to hand it in. I faxed mine. So one of my buddies gave me a fax number. I didn't even know if that fax number was legit. Hindi ko nga alam kung sinulat lang niya sa likuran ng papel eh. So I went to FedEx at that time because they were the only ones that would do like faxes. And I faxed my resume to some random number that a friend of mine at the casino gave me. Sure enough, I got a phone call. And I dealt with this. I made a video about this previously. But, you know, if you haven't viewed it, you know, long story short, they hired me as one of the managers because I already had previous casino experience as a dealer in Niagara plus the Toronto roving casinos. So basically what happened was I believe 20 or 21 years old. It's been so long. And I got hired as a manager. So my new job, I wear a suit every day and I tell people what to do at 21 years old. So it was wonderful. Not only that, obviously, you know, with a promotion, you also get a pay bump. And that's where I stayed for 23 years. It's a Brantford Casino. That place changed my life. It really did. And I loved the people, I loved the job, I loved everything about it. But just like anything else, all good things have to end. And when the pandemic happened, you know, that's when things kind of fell apart. But like I said, I do believe God has a plan for everybody. Because when the pandemic happened and nagkagulo-gulo yung mundo sa casino, I was able to land a job at BMO as a mortgage specialist. So, yeah, totally different industry, but God has a plan. So, without going into any more detail, that's basically my life story, you know. How I started, where I ended. And this is where I ended. The casino will always be a big part of my life because I spent more than a quarter century in that industry. I made so many friends, met so many people, learned so much. I wouldn't be the person who I am today, you know, without the casino industry. And I'm always going to be very thankful about that. But yeah, I just wanted to share this story with you. You know, hopefully, you know, ma-inspire yung mga iba nating kabayan dyan. You know, everybody starts somewhere. You know, it doesn't matter how low, doesn't matter how high, everybody starts somewhere.